Hey students, it's time for a lesson on unemployment. This can be found in chapter 13, pages 247 to 250 of your textbook. It's actually a pretty important topic, and it's not one that I think people are unfamiliar with. If you're like many people I know, you have been unemployed or you have known someone who has been unemployed in perhaps the last year. In fact, in my household of 4 people, 3 of the 4 people, me being the one who is excluded here, lost their jobs due to pandemic-related employment changes. So the goal here is for you to be able to explain the impact of unemployment on individuals and the larger economy, who is included and who is not included in unemployment figures, what is a labor force, and how do you calculate the unemployment rate, and to describe the 4 unemployment types: frictional, structural, seasonal, and cyclical, and how each impacts the person's job prospects. Now, unemployment is a lot more complicated than what we might be looking at in this particular screencast here. My job working with the Department of Labor gave me a lot of experience working with people who had numerous personal barriers to receiving a job, to just attaining a job. And some of those barriers might have included things like extreme poverty or a lack of skills or a felony record. All of these things make employment really, really difficult. And unemployment has numerous psychological, social, and economic implications. All right. So who is employed? When the Bureau of Labor Statistics does their unemployment figures, they interview about 60,000 people, and they use those as a baseline for how to determine unemployment figures. So anyone who is employed, they only have to have worked 1 hour for pay during the survey week. So as you can imagine, this leaves out a lot of people who would otherwise want to be working for more than 1 hour. It might include 15 hours with a family business or a vacation or out sick. They would be considered to be employed. An unemployed person is actively looking for work in the last 4 weeks, unless they are furloughed. Now, to be furloughed means to be temporarily laid off from your job, with the understanding that when the job reopens, such as during the pandemic, many restaurant workers were furloughed, and they were told that, after the lockdown ended in June, they would have their jobs back. So that there's a little bit of a difference there, and unemployment figures are a little tricky when you have a lot of people being furloughed. Unfortunately, this picture cuts off the years here, but this goes from 1990 to 2020. And we can see an incredible spike in 2020. This was at the time of the lockdown, up to about 15%. And you can see that it has rapidly decreased unemployment. Again, that doesn't mean people are fully employed or doing what they want to do. But the other thing that is notable about this is if you look at this figure right here, we were at about 3% unemployment before the pandemic. This is an exceptionally low employment rate, and in fact is considered to be full employment. Full employment is considered to be somewhere between 4 and 6%. So this was really a precipitous loss of jobs that occurred in March, April of 2020, something unlike anything I have seen. So what is the labor force? The civilian labor force are those civilians who are employed and those who are unemployed in the country. Now, this excludes military personnel. They are not included in the labor force calculations. Federal government employees, retirees, handicapped persons who are on Social Security disability, people who are called discouraged workers. Discouraged workers are people who have been looking for a job And after a period of time, they merely gave up because they did not believe that they had the skills or abilities to acquire a job, or the economy was such that they merely were discouraged. And it does not include agricultural workers. Now, how the BLS computes the unemployment rate is you take the number of unemployed, remember that's excluding all of those people in the second bullet point, divided by the number of people in the labor force, which is the top bullet point, and you multiply that times 100. The labor force participation rate is the number of employed people plus the unemployed, and then the non-institutional adult population times 100. So this would be the number, the amount of people that desire to be in the labor force. I'm sorry, the percentage of people that are in the labor force. Okay, we'll talk more about that later, but those are slightly different numbers. So the current unemployment figures can be found on the Bureau of Labor Statistics website. As a Department of Labor employee, I used to get weekly reports from BLS about unemployment. I'm not going to read all of this to you. I'm going to put the BLS site on to our Schoology page, and I recommend that you take a look at it. In fact, you'll have an assignment to take a look at it and to look at some current statistics regarding current unemployment. One thing that I will point out about this, however, is that the unemployment rate in October declined by 1 percentage point to 6.9%. And the number of unemployed persons fell by 1.5 million to 11.1 million. Both of these measures have declined for 6 consecutive months, but are still nearly twice their February levels. So what that means is the unemployment rate is still high compared to February, and the number of unemployed persons is still very high compared to February levels. So take a look, read that last point on your own, and like I said, we'll be doing some looking at the BLS site and do some calculations on the unemployment rate. So what are some limitations to merely looking at the unemployment rate as a measure of an economy's health? Like I said before, it doesn't count those who are too frustrated or too discouraged to look for work. I personally know of people who did give up looking for work for a while. At the very deepest stages of our lockdown, there really wasn't a point for some people. If their particular skills were in the hospitality industry, they were not going to get hired unless they were willing and able to make a change. And another limitation of the unemployment rate is people are considered employed no matter their job or their part-time status. So a lot of people who are part-time may in fact desire full-time status, but in the unemployment rate, they are considered to be fully employed. And like I said before, some individuals may be vastly underemployed for their skill sets. And we see this when people have lost a job and they take a job just doing anything that is not using their skill sets just to put food on the table. So we're going to look at 4 types of unemployment, and I'll be talking about specific examples of those in the next few slides. Frictional is when someone's between jobs. Seasonal is something that you can expect because of changes in weather or demand. Cyclical is related to swings in the business cycle, which is what we're going through right now. And structural are when the worker's skills don't match the economy's needs. So let's take a look at this a little bit more closely. Frictional unemployment is just someone who quits a job because they don't get the hours they want. Maybe they're working in a retail industry and they do not like working nights and weekends anymore. And so they want to look for a job in an office that might still fit their qualifications and might still be a desirable job, but will have hours that are more suitable to what they're looking for their lifestyle and for their family. So you can consider this a voluntary type of unemployment. Structural unemployment occurs when factories or robotics or other kinds of machines are invented that do not require human labor. Now, this was a huge, huge change in the auto industry when robotics started taking over many of the jobs that humans had done. The important thing for economy to do when there is a large amount of structural unemployment is to find training programs or retraining programs for people to develop a skill set that fits what the economy now requires. Seasonal unemployment is something that people are well aware that they're going to experience because of the seasonal nature of their job. For example, a lifeguard who works at a beach in Minnesota can plan on not having their job in the winter. Just like someone who works with sled dog expeditions might expect to, not be having business in the summer. So these are very predictable. Oftentimes seasonal unemployment, these are jobs that might be taken by teenagers, such as lifeguards in the summer. I know one of my children did that as a seasonal job for many years. And then actually she was able to work in a pool during the winter. Cyclical unemployment is what we're experiencing when we have a downturn in the economy. So Bob's laid off from a job at a coffee shop when a recession causes a large decrease in the demand for coffee. This is also what happened during the pandemic. Many restaurants closed except for curbside delivery or home delivery. And so people who were servers, bartenders, and dishwashers in these restaurants, many of them experienced cyclical unemployment. Some were furloughed and they were able to get their job back once the restaurants opened up. But as you know, now we are facing another economic shutdown in Minnesota, at least for the next month in the restaurant industry. And so they are going to be experiencing cyclical unemployment. So my husband has been laid off twice from his work. His first kind of professional job out of college was working in a company here in the Twin Cities, and then he moved to working for IBM. He actually created this product, and it was one of the first menuing systems, and it was sold to hundreds of thousands of people across the United States. Now, if you notice something on there, you'll see your name. Does that look familiar? So it wasn't unusual for us to go to meet somebody new, and when we introduced ourselves, they would say, "Oh, are you the one that wrote Fido?" Fido is what they called Disk Organizer, and he's like, "Well, yeah," and they're like, "I see your name every morning when I turn on my computer." Well, my husband experienced cyclical unemployment in 2009. 2008, as many of you may know, was a time when the economy took a downward shift. And in 2009, my husband was laid off after working for 26 years with IBM. And it's a really difficult time. He most recently experienced another layoff from cyclical unemployment in the wake of the pandemic in June of 2020. So what is the government most concerned with? It's most concerned with cyclical unemployment, and it takes steps to correct it. Now, what happened during the pandemic was that we had stimulus checks sent out to families that made under a certain amount of money, and I've talked about these before. And the idea was that those who were furloughed or who were experiencing cyclical unemployment would still be able to keep the economy afloat by spending that money. what are the economic costs of high unemployment? First of all, lost potential output. You're producing inside the PPC or the PPF, as we called it. So remember, when you're at maximum production, you're producing along the production possibilities frontier. When we have a large amount of unemployment, our economy is not fully utilizing its resources. The economic costs for families can be catastrophic in some cases. Lost income can lead to homelessness. Lost medical benefits can lead to exorbitant medical bills that sometimes can be difficult to ever crawl out from under. There's also a societal cost. In the wake of the pandemic of 2020, and maybe I'll reuse this video someday, but in the wake of 2020, there was a huge loss of income tax revenue going both towards state and federal governments. And these state and federal governments, the taxes provide for many of the public goods that we receive, and they also pay for many jobs within the economy. We need to provide unemployment benefits, and those benefits come from income taxes. So again, we're just losing money from that it would normally be accrued through taxes. We're paying it out in unemployment, which the idea with unemployment is to bridge someone to employment. But it is not the full pay that someone's used to receiving, and it can be very difficult. So I'd like you to end today by looking at this particular slide. You can pause it and determine which type of unemployment each person is experiencing. So a Wisconsin construction worker cannot find work in the winter. Well, the winter, if their construction is primarily outdoors and it requires, the road construction, that would be seasonal unemployment, right? So see if you can come up with what type of unemployment each person is experiencing. Thank you for your time. I know this was a long cast today, and look for the BLS site on Schoology. Thank you.